the black pill, the red pill, communism, antinatalism, feminism, racism, religions. Everybody's always trying to run away from something to something. But it somehow doesn't dawn on them that if you have to run away into something, you're not winning. In other words, it almost cannot be the truth that one of your stupid ideologies is correct, because it's just a coping mechanism to face the world. So how could the truth be a coping mechanism against the world? Lately, my ideology has been coming apart in the sense that I don't really know who to trust or who to like anymore. In my younger days, I used to be more on the left, but these days, I'm not even on the political spectrum. The Israel-Palestine, or Palestine, I don't know how to pronounce it, conflict, has really pulled people apart and has produced, right-wingers who are teaming up with the left to watch for Palestine, and other right-wingers have been watching for Israel. And the point is not to talk about that conflict. I would need to learn more about it to speak about it educatedly, in an educated manner. I don't want to pull things out of my ass and pretend I know things I don't. A courtesy a lot of people don't give you these days. But the point is to just point out how things are sort of unraveling. They're coming apart in a very kind of extreme way. Where you don't even, the left and the right, they don't even hardly even exist as a group anymore, or as individual groups anymore. And it just seems like everybody's just hating each other. A lot of men hate women these days. A lot of women hate men. People of certain ethnicities and races hate each other, and then different races hate each other, like minorities hating other minorities. That's what I've seen. It's just very strange, and I think it just sort of goes to show you how there really is nothing to society, there's nothing to the world that really unifies people, right? So, the 1960s, the decade of love, or whatever it was, basically said, oh, imagine no possessions, no gods, we're gonna come together, we're gonna do drugs, and that's gonna be the utopian vision. Love is gonna save us, some kind of unity is gonna save us. And it's easy to see now, after all that optimism which was repeated in the 90s when the end of history was prophesized, essentially, by liberal optimists who said it was going to be the end of history because liberal societies have a humanizing effect, and they're going to stabilize everything too. And I think there's an element of truth in that. Liberal societies just seem more humane and more less privy to violence. But then again, there's the United States, which is a very liberal country, and is known for its rights and freedom for its own citizens. But we know what they do to the countries of other citizens, and we know how the global economy works. We know that it's based on exploitation, so even the nicest countries participate in the terror. So even though in some sense it's true, I think, in other sense it's not. In other sense, these liberal societies just do the same shit, except outside of their borders. And when it comes to drugs, there's a thread I'm trying to connect here, which is that just because you have a nice thing doesn't actually mean the nice thing is universally applicable. There's a lot of hypocrisy to a nice thing. So again, take drugs. In the 1960s, it was supposed to be that, the weed and psychedelic substances would usher in some kind of freedom, And strangely enough, as the world is going to shit, more and more countries are legalizing drugs. I think Germany just legalized weed a while ago, maybe even, I think on April 1st, something like that, who cares? And, it sounds nice, but you can see how that's kind of just like a coping mechanism to how the world is unraveling, right? So on the one hand, you can say, drugs, it's freedom, everybody's freedom. It's, you listen to Bill Hicks, who was like, yeah, man, weed, everybody should smoke weed, man. Like, totally, man. Nobody would get in car crashes, everybody's smoking weed, man. But it seems like Germany is not really fixing the world just because, like, nothing is really being fixed in Germany or anywhere else just because they're legalizing drugs. So although you could imagine no possessions, you could imagine people kind of loving each other and being like, yeah, man, it's weed, yeah, at the same time, the world can still be unraveling, right? So again, I have very limited understanding of this because I'm an idiot, but I think that Germany has like some controversy where they don't want to use nuclear or something, and there are some like idiotic heuristics that are being applied to climate change, like everybody's going to drive electric cars and that's going to solve it, or green energy is going to solve it, and that sounds nice, but apparently it's not good enough. It's not a good solution. That's what I've heard, and I need to educate myself on these things, no doubt. But it just on a surface level, it seems that there are that major catastrophes, cumulative major catastrophes that are happening before our eyes are kind of being masked over with heuristics, little pretend solutions to problems, such as, weed man, don't worry, the world is going to shit, but weed man, and then, everybody's smoking. Yeah, man, it's I know the world is burning, but at least we have weed, man. It's just bullshit, right? And this ideology that many people have already is not new. How the responsibility is being deferred to you to solve the problem, right? Like, just buy an electric car, bro, instead of the one that runs on oil, gasoline, that sort of crap, or diesel or whatever. And so that's or just go vegan, or which is nice, but smoke drugs, man, or look at us, we're so progressive, we let in a lot of immigrants, but it's not clear if we've done a good job of assimilating the immigrants, right? So in Hungary, I don't want to speak out of my league, but in Hungary, there's this whole shtick that the government has built their entire propaganda shtick, on anti-immigration, but they have opened their gates, let's say, to hundreds of thousands of immigrant workers, and and they apparently have like a term limit of like 2 or 3 years that they have to leave. I don't know if that's applied, but that's not a solution. Like, the solution to the problem of not having enough people in the country, fertility rates being too low essentially, is, yes, to let in immigrants, which is fine, but then not do a good job of assimilating them, right? So if you kick them out every 2 or 3 years, You just how that's that's about the worst solution you could possibly come up with. Because by the time they could assimilate, learn the language, they're already getting kicked out. You know, and I don't know how it goes in other countries. I think in other countries, a lot of immigrants are more permanent, but it's not clear that they are being assimilated well enough. I think a lot of people have pointed out, probably in an honest kind of, not just racist kind of, honest kind of way, that there's problems. And those problems are the fault of the government. The government needs to do a good job of assimilating people. And instead of doing that, it's just, so you can see the thread I'm going here. I'm weaving here that the solution is just some bullshit on the side of it, which is a theme I pursued in other videos of mine. That instead of actually like assimilating these people, like actually like trying to do something to pull people together, we're just gonna come up with nice little slogans and little virtuous things. Like that's what they Nietzsche called it, virtuous noise, right? That we love everybody. Everybody is the same, and it's all okay, and it's all wonderful, and instead of actually doing anything, we just do that. Largely, right? And I even think there's really no such thing as a solution. The different cultures are different, for example, and trying to assimilate them into one is going to be a heuristic at best. It's not going to be a solution. This is going to be a problem, no matter how you look at it. But I don't think that's like a racist thing. It's just obvious. That's just how the world works. People exist in different cultures, and it's going to be very difficult to assimilate them into one. And you can even question whether it's right to assimilate them into one. If their cultures are at odds, or elements of their cultures are at odds with this one, how could you possibly like square them with each other? Is it right? How far can you go? These are unsolved problems. We can be honest about it without being racist at all. But what I want to say about, let's say, Europe, or the West, as they say, is, and here I will attack racists, white supremacists. They will say, oh, it's a superior civilization, the West. Look at all the advancement, the human rights, etc. And in a sense, it's true, but in another sense, it's false, because every civilization that sort of works is just a kind of pathetic civilization. It's a kind of civilization where people are very mediocre, right? In order to have a civilization, you have to have a bunch of mediocre people, because the whole point of having a civilization or a society is to assimilate to it. You have to be alike, similar, and that's kind of like essentially a pull towards mediocrity. This society is, to have a society is to have a bunch of mediocre people. If you go outside of the norm, they will swat you down. And so, yes, we have built a civilization in the West of wealth, riches, but it's also produced a kind of situation where it's essentially murdering itself, in the sense that there are not enough children being born into it, and people are no longer having sex, no longer talking to each other. They're just inside, rotting away. And that is the effect of having an advanced civilization. You have an advanced civilization, you're basically killing it. Because, and this is a deeper theory here, because it seems to me that life itself is against intelligence, advancement, sophistication. The animals, the species which have the most children, tend to be less intelligent animals, bugs, let's say, fish, but more intelligent animals like mammals have less children. And on top of that food chain are probably humans, who, because of their high sophistication, have the least amount of children. Especially these days, the more advanced the civilization, I'm not saying that more advanced means more intelligent necessarily, but or better. I'm not saying better at all. I'm actually saying quite the opposite. But the more advanced the civilization, the less children you have. The most advanced, most educated societies have barely any children anymore in them. And I think that's no mistake. That's no coincidence. That's the cause of, or the consequence of this fundamental idea, or like law of biology, or whatever you want to call it. You might as well just call it that. That intelligence negates life, right? If you want to have life, an abundance of life, you have to have an abundance of stupidity, of simple, base life. If you have a very advanced kind of life, you're also going to bring down the amount of it, right? This is a fundamental kind of paradox that haunts civilization or life itself, that if you try to perfect it, it sort of goes away. And so, these people in the West who are like, well, white supremacists, racists, who are like, we're just so fucking superior to all those people in the poorer countries. Apart from that being very naive and reductive, it's not clear to me that we really are better. As I said, that just look at us. I mean, is there evidence that we're happier than people who live in mud huts, people who live in tribes? Like, I am willing to accept that we're happier than people who live in war-torn countries with starvation. I'm not disputing that. But there's something in between. There's something even better, even like less advanced than that, which is kind of base tribal life. Or maybe I shouldn't say base, but like a very simplistic kind of life, tribal life, or maybe like a village kind of life. I think those people are probably happier than us, right? And so it's just not clear to me that this really is working. And there's a kind of contradiction in what these right-wing racist types are saying, in that on the one hand they're saying, yes, we're so fucking advanced, we're just so fucking superior in our Western countries. On the other hand, they readily admit that there are severe problems with this advanced technology, with this advanced society. Not enough children, depression, etc., poverty, fatherlessness, or whatever. And that, of course, they will want to leave that at the door of liberalism and say, well, it's just the liberals who are doing it. I've seen this bullshit before. Oh, it's the liberals who are doing it. That's a very simplistic way of looking at things, right? They really think... Oh, raining a little bit. Let's see if we can survive. It's a very simplistic way of looking at things, because it's not just liberalism that's doing this, it's the advanced technology that you claim makes us superior in the first place. Our advanced knowledge and our advanced intelligence, which has built us sophisticated systems, which have built us this sophisticated system. I admit it. There's a level of intelligence, a sophistication there. But those are the very elements which caused many of these problems that you decry in the first place. It's not just liberalism. It's not. There's so these right-wing conspiracy theories with the WEF and you're gonna live in the pod and you're gonna eat, you're gonna live in the pod, you're gonna eat bugs. I'm sorry, but we already are eating like shit, right? So, and we already are living in pods, many of us. So just take a look at Hong Kong, for example. Hong Kong has almost, you could say, a tradition, you know, where they have these things called coffin houses or whatever, a coffin something. It's not really a house, but it's very far from being a house. But it's like a coffin home. That's like, it's called a coffin because it's about as big as a fucking coffin. You can hardly lay down in it. And Hong Kong is not a particularly liberal society, I don't think. And yet, they are living in the pods, as it were. And so it's just too easy to lay this at the feet of liberalism, or just take the eating the bugs kind of crap. We may not be eating bugs, but we are eating like shit. And that really has nothing to do with liberalism. You could have fat, unhealthy people in a conservative society. It's the same thing. They still eat like crap. And that is because of the kind of advancements that we have. If you have an advanced capitalist society, and it is pretty much always capitalist. I've never seen a communist society which is this advanced. A kind of capitalistic kind of society, and I'm not naive, I know it's the government, isn't it? But it's a capitalistic kind of society where that when you combine technology with the free market, you get a lot of options. And this lends itself to unhealthy behavior, unhealthy life. And so it's just not enough to blame liberalism, There is something about liberalism which is, you could say, is part of the problem, which is that if you want to give women their freedom, which you should, but if you want to give women their freedom, they're going to make the decisions that they're not going to be reliant on men anymore. And if they're not going to be reliant on men anymore, they really won't have any necessary reason to have children and to remain in families, right? And so you could say, if you return to a conservative society where women were more reliant on men, and then it would increase the childbirth rate. But then you have to ask, is that right? And I think if you're a decent person, you'll say no. You shouldn't do that. You should leave the fucking women alone to do what they want. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is fundamental incorrigible paradoxes which haunt society that you really can't fix. It's just not possible to fix it, right? And so I've never been able to get out of my pessimism, and I don't understand. We really can't have a world that's functioning properly, because everything functions at a cost, something that you have to pay for it to get something out of it. And it's going to cause insoluble problems. And we're going to pretend to solve those insoluble problems by giving people weed, giving them almost full sexual freedom, being politically correct, overly politically correct, and running away into different ideologies, none of which are real, none of which have any substantive existence. They're just delusions. Something that you have in your head to try and pretend that it's gonna be okay in the end. It's a religion. It's all religions. And religions are false. There's no God. 100% certain about that at this point. You know, I've actually just read Fire Punch, which is a manga by Tatsuki Fujimoto, and I just happened to read a part. I don't even know if it's true, but it said like, you know, like the reason in Hinduism, it said something about Judaism too, but it said in Hinduism the reason why you're not allowed to eat cows is because when the religion was like invented, something like that, the cows actually had like carried a disease that would kill people, and so they put it into the religion that you're not allowed to eat it. And maybe this is not true, you can fact check it, but I think that's a good representation of what religion is. It's just a delusion, you know. And we have many of those delusions, and I would say even the ones that work are delusions, right? You could say that capitalism in a sense works, like I'm willing to admit it. It's very efficient in a sense, but it doesn't mean that it's real, that there's any kind of truth behind it. It's just a way to make the world go around, and it, like I just said before, it has severe consequences that it works. And of course, we also know it's basically a lie in the sense that, you know, capital is heavily connected with the state, and that's the whole reason China was able to rise the way it did, as far as I know, is that they liberated, they freed the market, they liberated the fetters of state control, and they opened up to the market, but that's combined with heavy state control, and so it's kind of a lie. And we know that the banks had to be bailed out and so on. We know it's a lie, but even if you take that, this combination of capitalism and socialism as an ideology functions in a way, it has severe consequences, right? And it's just a way to organize the world. It's not the best. There's no fundamental reason. Oh God, my camera. Sorry, we're kind of battling the elements here. Here, nature, what's left of it these days. Anyway, I tried to make this work, if there's any point to it. Sorry. Yeah, and so the point is that it's all a delusion. It's just one way of organizing the world, and it has severe consequences. Like that, many of us are overweight, like me, obese, depressed, alone, virgins, suicidal, lazy, dispirited, disenchanted. And you know, you could just, if you think there's a problem, there's also a lack of faith, and there's a lack of families, and the lack of belief in God, and you know, there are major internal problems which happen because of the global capitalist system itself, which is the immigration. It's largely it's a fault of the global system, in the sense that those people want to come to these countries, these Western developed countries, because their own countries are just not very good in some sense. The war-ridden, poverty-laden, and that's the reason why. Large part of the reason why is because we just don't take care of them in our global system. We just don't give them enough money. We don't give them enough opportunities. And I think it's easily explained that. Why would we? I mean, the entire wealth is based on exploitation. Right? If we give those people, if we give those countries too much wealth, who's gonna mine? Who's gonna mine the ores and you know, the crystals and the other substances that we need to run our machines and so on, you know. We know perfectly well we need that exploitation, we need that poverty in order to motivate people to go do the shitty jobs that we need to do, and then cash out, you know. We know that perfectly well. We're not stupid, right? So if we raised everyone out of poverty, there will be nobody left to do the nasty work. We know that perfectly well. Nobody's going to do it. We have to force them to do it. So there's an element of nastiness to the world that you really can't fix in a realistic kind of way. Of course, people, idealists and ideologists will say you can, but you really can't. It's not realistic. So we're sort of stuck in the jaw of two. We're sort of stuck in jaws of two beasts, in the sense that if we go left, shit's gonna go bad. If we go right, shit's also gonna go bad. If you advance, shit's gonna go bad. If you don't advance, shit's gonna go bad in some other way. But I would still say that not advancing is better, because if you don't advance, the amount of ways you can kill and torture people is decreased, right? And what else? I'm very disorganized, but I'm just really tired and depressed. So anyway, a while ago, a couple of days ago, I saw this movie. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, no doubt. I think it's from Hong Kong, as a matter of fact. I think it's called Chungking Express. I have no idea if I pronounced it even half correctly. Chungking Express. And what stuck out there in that movie for me is that there was a guy who lived in this really shoddy apartment by an airport. Really, really shoddy apartment. But he still had two girls running around his apartment. His ex, and then before, and then another one. And it just made me think, like, imagine bringing a girl home today to an apartment like that. I mean, you'll be cooked, right? There's no way a girl is gonna accept that shit these days. Unless maybe you're really attractive, but she wouldn't accept it as a living situation at all. And that's kind of funny, because everything is so expensive now. It's we're almost returning to the point where that would be the normal, to live in a shoddy apartment alone. And so what I'm trying to say is that, again, I'm going based on an outsider's perspective. I don't know too much about whether these incest statistics are correct. I'm much more interested in the phenomena itself. But if it's true that women's demands and expectations of men have risen so much, that they want this guy with a six-figure salary, 6 foot tall at minimum, etc. If that's true, see, that's really fucked up, because today it's getting more difficult to accomplish those things. In the sense that it's maybe not being tall. Probably people are taller these days, but that's not the point. Is that it's really difficult to be a functioning high quality man these days, right? Because everything is against you. Unhealthy food makes you fat. Your lack of motivation to do anything makes you fat and unhealthy. It's difficult to have a good place to live, because everything is so fucking expensive. You spend all day working and you have no motivation to do anything after that. So you hardly even take care of yourself, or you just have no motivation to. You're the average guy. And so it's getting more difficult to be a so-called high-value man. But at the same time, women's expectations have not correlated with that. They have not been keyed. As a matter of fact, they seem to be going the opposite fucking direction. In other words, it's getting more difficult to be a high-value man, but women's expectations are just going way fucking high. If these incels are correct, and I don't necessarily think they're wrong, right? There are just certain facts that we need to face up to. bravely, not just run away from them. Like, again, it's easy to buy into it, from what you see around you. And what I found, god damn it, is so anyway, sorry, it's the I get like raindrops on the thing. But anyway, what I found interesting about that is that this might sound really problematic, but it's progressives recognize inequality is a bad thing, right? But there seems to be a similar kind of trend happening with the kind of sexual marketplace, which is that less of the goods is going to a fewer set of like a fewer people, right? And probably shouldn't phrase it that way, but it's the same way that the rich is getting richer, the Chad is getting chatter. And I think, without getting too ridiculous, you could make the argument that there really is a way in which men are being fucked over by this, that they really deserve. I'm not saying they deserve women per se, but they really deserve at least a fair shot. They really deserve more consideration, which increasingly I think they're not getting from society. And if the man raises that issue, he'll be accused of being some kind of raging incel, misogynist. And the funny thing is, they would throw in his face the same thing the capitalist defenders throw in the progressive's face, which is that you're entitled. You're saying you're entitled to women, you're entitled to a house, you're entitled to possessions, And I'm not saying that they are entitled to women, but they should be entitled to a fairer chance. But they're not. I think if these incels are to be correct, and I think there's a good shot that they are. I mean, these are just personal reflections, but I went to like a bar or disco place a while ago, and there was hardly any fucking women there. Maybe 3, 4 for like 25 or 30 guys. Legit, it's like the ratio must have been like 85 to 15 or 90 to 10. Yes, it was crazy, right? And maybe half of those women were already taken. And so, most guys there went home alone without getting laid, no doubt. Maybe all of them. And so, if that's any evidence to go by, then, which it's not, but for me personally, I see something about it. And if you're a guy who has actually had experience with women, I think there's a good likelihood that you've seen that modern women, many of them, it's perfectly reasonable to say, because these days mental illness is much more prevalent, or at least what we understand as mental illness is much more prevalent. Of course, you could just say the whole thing is a lie and there's no such thing as mental illness. Some people do, actually, as a matter of fact. But that's it, a lot of women are now mentally ill, and so even if you can get laid, you might get really hurt because the woman that you're dating is a little bit nuts, right? And if you're a guy who actually is not an incel and has had experience with women, you might be able to attest to that, right? And so again, it's just me trying to understand the world. Like I might be wrong about all this. It's just I'm trying to put the picture together honestly. And and when I do, I get a pretty bleak fucking picture. you know Even if I sound crazy, or whatever I sound, it just, there's a certain, there are truths about the world, and you can look at it, even if it's unpleasant. And I think that's what we should do. I think we should return to a situation where we're really more honest, because I've cried in my previous video about how this modern society is very open, in the sense that it's very genuine, in the sense that people get to like express themselves, like they get to talk about what kind of porn they watch, right? Like, if you get caught if you're live streaming and you get caught opening a porn tab, it's just, you almost don't even care anymore, right? It's like, yeah, I'm jerking off the hand, but I think there's a disturbing lack of disturbing lack of honesty, right? So we've ordered the flies, sorry, not the flies, the wings, the chicken wings, but we don't have the fries with them, or the barbecue. We're missing an element of the picture here. It's very genuine in the sense that you can be yourself, you can be quirky, but honesty just hasn't really come about with it. You have to be very careful with what you say. Every word can get you in a monopoly prison. Every little mistake, if you express yourself the wrong way, if you have wrong think, sorry to use the pathetic expression, but come on, it's true. So that I'm sure somebody's made this argument before, but what about autistic people? I'm autistic. I'm not trying to play the victim now, but I am a victim. But anyway, we can talk about that. I hate those people who are like, victim culture. As if we're not fucking victims here. Well, the word fucks us all. That's what Kurt Cobain said, I think. Like, we're not fucking victims in this fucking purgatory and hell, that we call society and the world. The bombs flying everywhere, you can barely afford a fucking hole in the ground. You can't get laid, but you're not a victim at all. But those same people complain about how, they're being silenced all the time, doesn't make any sense. But anyway, autism, what we call neurodivergence. What I've noticed here as a neurodivergence myself, I'm my own divergence. Anyway, what I've noticed is that it's actually very difficult for an autistic person, a neurodivergent person, to function in this society, because we tend to have a desire, or we tend to have an incapacity to lie. Like, I don't think autistic people are very good at lying. We're not really good at it. We just kind of want to say what we think, and it's maybe for neurodivergent person it's more difficult to express him or herself or themselves, whatever pronoun you want to use. It's just more difficult for no normal person can express himself in an adequate kind of way, because he knows how to assimilate to society well. That's why he's not neurodivergent. But if a person is neurodivergent, the whole point is that it's very difficult for him to function, to put the right words in the right orders, to think and say the right things. That's why the whole fucking point is that they're divergent. And so this society where what we call cancer culture, whatever that is, I'm not sure, but I think there's an element of like dogpiling and canceling people, casting them to the shadow realm because of things they might have said or done. There's a lack of forgiveness and so on, but which is because of the internet. Because on the internet, time is flattened, and time is, it's the Buddhist principle that everything is always now. That's internet time. Because on the internet, when you see something, it's always happening now. You don't recognize that happened 2 years ago, right? You don't. There's no sense of progression of time on the internet because you're seeing it now. You don't recognize that the post was made 2 years ago. You don't. You know, like, you know what I mean? Unlike in real life where things just move. But anyway, there's this element of cancellation, I think, which people have spoken about. So you can evaluate that on your own. But like, there's a lack of diversity of thought. Ironically, lack of diversity in universities, where if you don't toe the line, you're fucked, right? Which I can believe, right? I mean, you've seen this miserable things actually happen, like, dinner, no white dinners. Like, you're only allowed to go if you're not white. Like, again, I'm not trying to like play the victim here for white people, but it's, come on, what the fuck, you know? Like, these things are real. They're happening. There are really crazy fucking people out there that are pushing this, and it's not gonna do to just ignore it, because it seems to be a certain kind of tendency. To whatever degree the tendency goes is debated, but it's there. It's there. And anyway, so I just think that it's very ironically, because neurodivergent people are supposed to be protected in the liberal kind of ideology, the woke kind of ideology, if you will. Those are different things, but yeah, let's just call it woke. True liberalism is not this. But yeah, so it's anti-autistic and anti-neurodivergent in the sense that for neurodivergent person, the whole point is that they can't really assimilate very well. And in this society, if you don't say the right thing in exactly the right way and you don't have the same thought process, you're fucked, you're cooked. They get you. And so, ironically, you see a kind of internal contradiction, a la Marxism, that it's combusting from within, or this idea that we're tolerant, but we're really not tolerant. It's really silly, it's really stupid, and I think it's been a big mistake. I wish we had a more honest kind of discourse, and I think what's been happening is this whole thing has been unraveling, as I've said in the beginning parts, that left and right are kind of going there. Like, right is going this way, other right is going that way, left is going here, left is going, like, like, there's no longer unity even within the divisions. Everything is going away, and I don't know where this is gonna end. I'm guessing in some kind of catastrophe. But it almost gives me a sense of freedom, because I no longer have to be committed to something. Like you no longer have to be committed to anything, because if you can hardly find a group that agrees with everything you think, or most. You run into contradictions and differences almost everywhere you go. And that means you have more freedom, and you'll be forced to think on your own. So I think this, although it's a series of tragedies, I think this multiply divided society actually gives us an opportunity to be free, to think and do for ourselves. On the other hand, you could say, okay, that's more victory for the capitalists who get to divide everybody and control their mind, bickering about nonsense while they steal their money, right? Sure, that's going on too. But at least individually, we have an opportunity to grasp the moment and try to do something with it. Like, society is not necessarily over. Like, we could come to pop up in some clearing somewhere, some meadow, something, and come to something entirely new. But but that just sounds like really another delusion. Imagine no imagine no possessions, no gods. That just seems like it's circling back to the same 1960s delusion. So I wonder if we can sort of get away from that somehow and move to a more individualistic society in a way that's not just a return to some other shit. That's not just a return to neoliberal ideology or some hokey, hunky-dory bullshit about no possessions. That's probably just a delusion too. Because ultimately speaking, nature is beautiful, but society sucks. Society cannot comprehend that things are fundamentally simple, right? Society doesn't see the trees. It always needs more and more and more, and it ruins everything eventually. As long as we have a society, a civilization, there's not going to be peace, I think. It can only happen when it will no longer be. You know. So what comes to mind is Rust Cole from True Detective, you know. Bunch of brothers and sisters walking hand in hand away from a rough deal. That would be nice. That would be my ideal. Unfortunately, if you have brothers and sisters, you also have people who are not your brothers and sisters, right? If you need to have the concept of brothers and sisters, you're already fucked. When you create the me, you also create the you. And when you add the me and you together, you create a we. But if you create a we and an us, you also create a they and a them. So, you see, you can never really go anywhere. You can never really multiply yourself into freedom. You can't make concepts. Or if you want to be more positivist about it, you can't understand the world and then have it that be a good thing. You know, that's why this kind of scientific positivism of trying to understand, of claiming that you can understand everything eventually, and based on our reasoning abilities or our perception, we can understand everything, and so that's going to solve all problems. That's not going to happen. Because there's no fundamental binding connection between a covenant bond between scientific understanding and ethical or social progress, right? So a philosopher to look up in that department is called John Gray, who doesn't believe in progress. He believes in scientific progress, which in a way is real. I'm more skeptical about science, but he believes it's real. But the scientific progress doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with social progress, and I would say it's basically the opposite. That when you make up all these concepts or you understand the world, it will only create more problems. You know, so let's give a problematic example here too. So there are races who do deal with race. Like race is really important to them. Race science. Even if they were right. That race is like a real thing. It's not just a social concept, not a social construction. It's a real thing that you can perceive in the world. The ideas that we superimpose on race are a lie, right? So even if they say yes, we really are just different racially, in a kind of objective, fundamental way, they pile a bunch of fucking shit on top of that turns it into a lie. They start deriving conclusions like, well, two races are not the same, so I guess they should live in different continents. You can see, and there's no justification for that shit, even if the concept was scientifically sound, like just racism. It is about culture, and it's not racist to discuss incorrigible differences between cultures. That's not racist as bullet, Otherwise, you would have to say, well, the Nazis, they had their own culture, right? Yeah, but they sucked. Fuck them. I don't mean to say like we should, it's just you need to do something. Like this is perfectly normal and robust a conversation to have in a non-insane world. To invite people to actually discuss on how we're gonna solve these problems, how to balance the plates. But it just doesn't happen, right? Like I've consciously in the past like 40 minutes, I don't know, I've consciously been saying some controversial things. I knew it. I knew it was gonna be controversial when I said them. But I'm trying to say it to prove a point in a way that these conversations are not really to be had. It wouldn't do to say them. You know, we're not allowed to be honest. It's not a very honest society. There's gonna be a problem for us. We could talk about lots of things at this point. And if you guys have ideas, if you're watching this at all, you can give me ideas on what to discuss exactly. But I think we could talk about Andrew Tate. What is Andrew Tate? I mean, isn't it, these people, like they used, like they I think they run or they used to run like a webcam industry, like business. I'm not clear on the specifics, but I specifically heard his brother say, yeah, I was running a webcam business, right? And that's just so fucking ironic because these guys are importing a kind of reactionary ideology, but at the same time, they are the embodiment of what's wrong in liberal society, in the commodification of people and of the switching of real connections with porn, you know, of material possession, right? It's just so fucking ironic that the people claim they've unhooked themselves from the matrix, are the ones who are deepest in it. Like, because people like Andrew Tate and all these red pill types, red pill manosphere types, who preach a certain kind of return to masculine values, and these people couldn't exist without those things they criticize, right? So they're like a bee who dies when they sting. They um, they couldn't exist without the thing they're attacking, and what's more, they profit off of it and live it perfectly well. The guy is the most rapacious fucking capitalist whore, but he's gonna talk about how, well, we need to return to tradition. So that's just another example how things are breaking down. There's no longer everything is ironic. It's Hegelian, if you will. The things turn into their own opposite, and that's what we have. It's like when you flip a pancake, over itself, or a tortilla. That's what we have now. Everything is very ironic and turns into its own negation, and something very fucking weird comes out in the other end. Full Metal Alchemist. If you know what that means, you know what that means. Anyway, yeah. So that's him, just a jerk, no doubt. Jordan Peterson, let's say. It does say let's say a lot, but Jordan Peterson, he is a scam artist, scumbag. He's been exposed over and over again of not knowing what the fuck he's talking about at all. like when he debated Slavoj Žižek. Or if you're an antinatalist, you know he debated David Benatar and got fucking cooked, right? So this guy pretends to know things. He pretends. He doesn't know shit. He's a very bad philosopher and a thinker. That's why he pisses me off a lot, because he gets all this cred. And he's just such an awful thinker. He's just not very logical, not very good at logic. And he pretends to know things a lot that he doesn't. Like, you know, when he talks about Foucault, let's say, and says he was a Marxist and he wasn't. Just makes shit up. And then gets caught, you know, when he was supposed to debate Marxism, he read the Communist Manifesto and got blown the fuck out by Zizek, who's about 14 times smarter than him. And this is the big guy, you know. He's the best the fucking right wing can produce, apparently. At least in terms of popularity, which is no good measure of anything, I know, but, you know, sure the smarter ones. But even the smarter ones, I mean, who cares, you know, they have just delusions in their heads too. We need to return to monarchy. Well, it's not Jordan Peterson, but, you know, one of them says, we need to return to monarchy. It's like, why the fuck should we return to monarchy for? You know, like, smartphones and monarchy don't go together. It's a joke. So what's the point? I mean, Mishima, you know, the Japanese novelist, was wanting a return to the emperor. And I understand the kind of nationalist drive, and that there's a kind of meaning to it. And I say another very controversial thing. I have an element of respect for people who are willing to sacrifice themselves to the point where they die for a cause. I don't like war. I don't like violence, but I do like the sacrifice. I admire it. I like people who are brave, you know. And in this society, it's the opposite. You get to live another day because you're just a coward. You run away from danger. You know, that's why I don't really like old people, you know, because 95% of the time when you're old, it's only because you lived a life of cowardice. Otherwise, you would have died a long time ago. So I like an element of heroism and bravery, by which I don't mean to valorize war. But I think when Mishima was talking about the lack of meaning, I think he was right there. But people like Peterson, I think are just major cucks. Because Peterson doesn't want you to die a heroic death. He just wants you to go back to work. There's nothing heroic about going back to work. I mean, Peterson's underlying message is that you should just shut your mouth and go back to work and maybe believe in God. But his belief is kind of a very pathetic, false, ironic kind of belief. Because... Sorry, I'm getting blown the fuck out by the rain. There's some disturbing developments in the sky. I think I'm fucked. But anyway, so he's ironic because you know, all this meaning stuff, all this God stuff, just to say go back to fucking work and do your job. Like, the guy is just a social assimilationist. All he cares about is maintaining society for some fucking reason that I'm never able to figure out. I don't understand why society is a fundamentally valuable structure that you need to maintain at all cost, right? It's just not something I get. And, you know, he says, like, if you don't want to have children, then you're either delusional or, like, you're crazy. You know, he says something like that. That you're either delusional or you're not thinking or some bullshit like that. It doesn't matter because it didn't make any sense at all. And the stupidest thing he said was that your ancestors did it. Just something I mentioned in the previous video. Your ancestors did it, so they must have been right. It's like, no, they were all wrong. Fuck them. Yeah, every single one of my ancestors was an idiot. You know, fuck him. What do I care? You know, it's no evidence of anything. It's actually counter evidence, because we know that procreation is correlated with stupidity, lack of education. You're smarter, you don't have kids. You know, that's the R selection versus K selection I was talking about earlier. That's what it's called. One of those is like fast breeders, and the other ones are like more careful breeders. And yeah, it's just, this, all he cares about, all these people care about is to like assimilate you to society. Like, it's very important to them for some reason that you do your job, you shut up, you don't play the victim, you just go and work. And it's just such a simple-minded fucking ideology. It's so stupid. Why should they don't question. Why should I think that's a good idea? Explain it to me. Why should I think it's a good idea to not be a victim, to not cry, to not whine, and to shut my mouth and go to work? Explain. Because, they're just not able to give an argument. They just think it's something that just needs to be there. But they cannot answer this fundamental question of why. But I feel like this is not really going anywhere. It's just, it's just, can you debate the antinatalist argument? And I think the only answer they have is God. God told you. There's almost always an underlying element of God, And if there isn't, it's even more incoherent. If God doesn't enjoin you to do it, then what the fuck is the point? Like how do these rationalist atheists justify it? Well, you need to reproduce the molecule, Okay, why? Well, because it wants to reproduce itself. Why should I care? Well, because it gives you like experiences and stuff. Yeah, but a lot of those are bad, especially these days. It's not looking pretty nice. It's better to deny our programming, I think. I'm not able to give a counter argument to antinatalism. At least if you hold some kind of basic ethical position about what is bad and what is good. I mean, I'm a nihilist, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think there's any value in the universe. I think there's something magnificent in the universe, but I wouldn't call that like objectivity. Some philosophers have called it the absolutes, You can call it what you want. There is some fundamental beauty in there. But that has nothing to do with society or reproduction. It has to do with self-actualization. Becoming who you truly are. And doing what you want and going all the way. That I like. That I support. But these people, they conflate that with assimilation to society. There's nothing fundamentally just or divine about assimilating to society. Society is a cruel structure. If you're called mad just because you don't assimilate to it properly. That's all their arguments amount to. Is you don't want to play the game, then fuck you. But they're not able to go beyond that. They're not able to question why I should give a fuck about assimilating to a society that's fundamentally based on inequality. Because capitalism is fundamentally based on it cannot exist without inequality. If you give people too much welfare and try to raise everybody out of poverty, there will only be inflation. The cost will increase because people have more spending power. So if we just increase this, like you can't get rid of it. If you don't give people enough welfare, some of them will just be poor. But if you give everyone welfare, if we just increase the buying power of everybody, so it won't actually like fix the inequality. It just makes things more expensive. You can't fix inequality in a market system. But non-market system hasn't been shown to work. Another terrible vice we're put in. A double bind. I think the fundamental cognitive mistake is to think that just because you have the ability to pinpoint a problem, then there must also be a solution. And I have elaborated on in previous videos that there really is no such thing as a solution anymore. You know, there are only heuristics, have solutions. And that you could say is almost like a maturation of people, because they can understand that, yeah, solutions don't really exist. So instead of going for utopian solutions, increasingly they're just banking on heuristics. You know, they know, yeah, we can't really solve it, so let's just try this alternative here, this alternative there. I think there's more atheism, like there's more pessimism and cynicism, which I think is a sign of an intelligent mind, but it's also a sign of sad times. It's a sign of disenchantment, giving up, and a breaking down of the system. That's the kind of times we're living in now, you know. I mean, just think about the kind of music we listen to, or the movies we like, or the anime we watch. Almost all of it is sad, you know. It's shoegaze, it's this kind of stuff that's sort of melancholic. That's the kind of music that's popular these days. An anime like Chainsaw Man, it's, you know, it's very depressing, it's very sad, it's very like, you know, but that's what we like, because we can relate to it. And although that's a sign of a healthy and powerful intellect, to recognize the shit we're in, it's also a sign of major breaking down of the system. And instead of trying to put the system together, I think the way forward, the only way I can see forward, is some kind of individual liberation, you know, which you could easily call ideology. Like, yeah, you're just it's kind of a Protestant ideology that replaces works with inner life, good works with inner life. But the good works just end up being a utilitarian function to society, you know. I have talked about in previous videos of how society is utilitarian, that the good works really just amount to scratching the balls of society, you know. Most of that, of course, you can do some good things, but I think those good things are gonna be almost always individualistic, because if you try to provide a systemic solution to a problem, the problem is that it will usually just blow back in your face at some point somehow, right? So if you try to, again, you give people more rights, more freedom, eventually they just become lazy and complacent. More technology, an advanced society, they just become fat and unfuckable, while at the same time still demanding fucking, right? And, you know, of course there are some things which you could not, you know, you obviously have to support, like, you know, the freeing of the slaves or something, yes. Equal rights for minorities, yes. But slavery, there's actually more slaves in the world than ever before. It's a fact. It's about 50 million. So you know, you can see the irony of the blowback of what happens when you try to solve a problem. Is that you solve the problem, okay, maybe you have, you know, you could say we have to do it because we're decent people. But you know, a few centuries later, you will see that there are actually more slaves than ever before. You know, or if you give women equal rights, it's good. I mean, it really is good. I swear, I think it. But it will cause major disruptions to the society. right? So I'm just saying that there's no solution. No matter what you do, you just end up fucking up in some other way. From the mindset of your own perspective of what you want. You want a functioning society, you want to be decent, but you want a functioning society. You can't have both. It's not gonna happen. That's what I'm trying to say. That's all I'm trying to say. You know, I'm not saying that women's liberation is bad or ending legal slavery is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that it kind of everything blows back in your face no matter what you try. And that's just the fundamental flaw of the universe, of the world. And so it happens that if there is a God, he must be an evil God or an incompetent God. That's Gnosticism, I think. You know. And, you know, I think we might benefit from a kind of negative theology where maybe there is a God, but he's an asshole. He's just lazy, or, you know, he's abandoned us. I can, you know, that's the biblical story. He's abandoned us. I can believe that. But if he's abandoned us, then why are you pretending like he loves us? That's what, you know, either he abandoned us or he loves us. Which one? You know, just drop the part when we're going to be liberated. It's not going to happen. We're fallen and we'll remain fallen. A fallen creature doesn't get liberated. A fallen creature is fallen. You know? He ejected us. God ejected us from paradise because we ate from the knowledge of the tree of knowledge, which is a very good metaphor for how shit got bad. We ate from the tree of knowledge. We figured out how to split the atom. Then we went and killed the Japanese. And that's another thing you could argue about, but that's not the point. The point is that when you have knowledge, you also have the increase of terrible things happening because your potency increases. Your radius increases, the radius of destruction. And the Industrial Revolution and agriculture, systemic modern agriculture, plowing of fields and so on, with machines and so on, have made it so that there was a population bomb, right? And that couldn't have been the world wars with tens of millions of victims without all those people being there in the first place, and without the technology that they had created. That was only possible because we had eaten from the tree of knowledge, right? That's the, you know, that's a good description of what reality is here. So religion can be used to understand the world, but it has to be twisted a little bit. You know, it's, you know, the naive interpretation doesn't make sense. You know, only if you twist it does it make sense. Yeah. What else? I mean, what's been on my mind? Obviously, Israel-Palestine has been on my mind lately because, you know, one of my favorite animes is Attack on Titan, AOT, Shingeki no Kyojin, and that anime, I think, is all about hate, like how intergenerational hate works. You know, with this, everybody pointing at each other. It's a very powerful theme in this anime. Everybody pointing at each other. Who's the enemy? Where's the enemy? You. And it's just very sad to see what's happening there. It's very sad to see that people who's been genocided has done such terrible things to another minority, right? Because I have very limited knowledge on this too, because I don't know, I'm just too lazy / depressed to look into it, because I know what I'm gonna see is just, okay, more murder, people murdering each other. Okay, I get really depressed, and, you know, I'm very just don't want to deal with it. But you know, it's children, women being slaughtered because most of those people are young. So you can see how it doesn't necessarily that just because you've been done wrong, it doesn't mean that you will see that wrong is wrong. That there's no reliant and cumulative understanding or knowledge about what's wrong and what's right. It shifts. Just take a look at the US. That's very prominent. It's a very good example. You remember in 2016 when Trump was like running around with an LGBT flag? Even he venerated his audience for supporting LGBT people. Like, it seemed like a real nice guy then. Nearly 10 years later, it's, LGBT people are groomers and they're rapists and they're coming to rape your children and we need to take away their equal rights and so on. It's like that. It's very easy. It's very quick how things can degenerate. I watched Candace Owens. I happened to see it, unfortunately. Very stupid woman. A couple of years ago, like a few years ago, I saw a clip from a few years ago, I suppose, where it was like, where he was talking positive. She was talking like, my gay friends. Like she was being transphobic, but she was doing it in a way where she was defending gay people, right? My gay friends. I have gay friends. And later, I watched another video of hers when she was talking about the homo agenda, right? So, few years before, my gay friends. Few years later, the homo agenda. Completely shifted. Yeah. And again, understand, if you're gonna make a counter argument that some of these LGBT people they're grooming your case, they show you, even if you were right, which I think you're fucking wrong. Even if there are some of them, there's no evidence of a systemic issue. I mean, this is an easy one, but just look at the Catholic Church. I mean, that's why you want to look at pedophiles, look at the fucking religions. Oh, but those are gay guys too. It doesn't matter. You want religion? There's your fucking religion. You want to play that game? I can play too, right? But again, even if you were right, it would still be an idea. It would still be a lie. That it gets blown out of proportion, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that reason. There's a limit to reason in the sense that even if what you say is correct, you're still gonna pile on a bunch of lies on top of your reason. So you're never really gonna arrive at a reasonable conclusion. Most people, most of the time, because most of them are possessed by ideology. It's not enough to say some LGBT people are bad, which is surely a fact. You have to say, and most of them are groomers and they're rapists, and the whole ideology is rotten to the core, and need to kick them out of schools and not have gay marriage, and you just get out of control. No matter who it is, left wing, right wing, they're all fucking idiots when they have ideology. They don't speak their own mind. When you join a group, you become the group. The ideas, the intent of the group. But the group doesn't really exist. The group is just a series of individuals with a group in each of their mind. A group in each of their mind. In all of their mind, there's a group. It doesn't really exist, right? The group doesn't literally exist. It's just a bunch of people with bullshit in their heads, with similar bullshit in their heads. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's what I said before. There's no society. There's no humanity either. It's a lie too. Right? Most assemblages You could say all of them are just lies. They're only components, parts. You know, they might have causative power together, but that's only because they're made of parts. The parts are more powerful than the whole. If the whole has any power, it's only because of the parts. So that's something that I don't know what exactly, but you know, it just speaks against unity, I suppose. What else? What else? What else? What else? What else? Sure, I could go somewhere else, but otherwise I just sort of give up and you lose the thread and what you were. Sure, I wanted to say like 10,000 more things, but I forget. So I just have to pick it up later. Another video. Dude. Well, pause. I look at what I've done. Maybe I'll come back. Maybe not. Yeah. I mean, I could still speak. Technically, I could speak forever. But yeah, another thought that was in my head was Dave Rubin. I had no idea which video it was, but once I just happened to click on his channel because I like to torture myself, I guess. I'm a sadist. Suffer sadist is what do you call that person who has to torture himself? I don't know. But self, you know. But masochist, yeah. Anyway, he said, he said, I love capitalism. Right? Like, you know, he was talking about how he was making money. Like it's not shameful to make money. Right? And he said it's okay because I love capitalism. And what I thought then was, this is the most depressing statement I've ever heard. I'm not necessarily exaggerating. It was extremely depressing to hear. Because how could you love capitalism? What is there to love? The car that you bought? Like, what do you love about capitalism? Isn't this so fucking depressing? Isn't that the coronation, the apotheosis of materialism, kind of material, you know, Andrew Tatean bullshit gone wild? It's just extremely depressing. There's nothing behind those eyes when he says that. It's a dead fucking statement. And it just makes me think, like, you know, this is what the conservatives want. It's just go to work, make money. When, you know, I never really understood why conservatives were capitalists. I never really understood the connection, because they like to smuggle in conservative ideology into capitalism, which is just so strange. There's no connection, you know. So I find it very strange that they bang the drum for capitalism as if that was a fundamental cornerstone of conservative ideology, especially this more free market type thing. What's fucking conservative about leaving people be homeless? Well, they can just find a job. You know, what if the job sucks? You know, like, well, then just deal with it. Like, why is this conservative? I don't. Because I was listening to Thomas Sowell. Happened to catch an interview with him, and he was like saying, yes, I think he was talking about couples, or black couples particularly. He was like, yes, it's difficult to make a living alone. That's why you should get married. Because if you get married, you're less likely to be in destitution. Which is like, it makes perfect sense. Two people, more money, right? You know, they just correlated with like a more stable, high income life, I suppose. It's not just more money, like, because they have to live in a bigger environment, but it just correlated, I guess, with a more stable life and a more high income life. They have the lives together, as it were. So you can see that this guy is a pure capitalist, and he smuggles in the conservative bullshit, like those two things have anything to do with each other. Like, why isn't the answer just give the poor people some better housing schema, you know? It's just a silent admission that the system is faulty when they say this shit. When you have to rely on nepotism, essentially, to make a living. That's not good. That's not fair market economics. And that there's also an element of a patriarchy in that, which is that it's kind of called to return to a situation where the woman has to be reliant on the man to make a living. That's what we wanted to get rid of. And they just kind of smuggling, like these two things really just dance together. And this, I don't know, I just find it really strange and hypocritical. Like, you're conservative, but you're for this kind of idea of kicking people to the curb, and you're this extreme individualism, and there's nothing conservative about any of this. The only conservative part is maybe this smuggling in of conservative ideas, yes. But why not also throw in there like social safety nets and so on? If you're a conservative, why is social safety nets against a conservative ideal? I never understood that. Another thing, yes, some more bullshit, like have you seen the Last of Us TV show, which is an adaptation of the game The Last of Us? And whatever, that caused a big controversy because apparently it was woke, because there was a episode but the whole episode was about two gay guys, which is of course no problem if you're not an idiot. But basically, I think there's some truth. There was some truth to their critique of this TV show, which is that the creators were smuggling in utopianism into it, right? There was a settlement there, which was supposed to be anarchist or communist, yes. And the TV show creators openly said, "We like this. This is what we want. We're communists." They basically said that. And I just thought, well, that's just, we can't make anarchism in the real world, so let's make it in a TV show, right? That's a perfect example of the failure of the left. So I was talking about the failure of the right, their own bullshit, their hypocrisy. Now let's look at the failure of the left. It's, I can't do anything in the real world, and I'm not doing anything in the real world, so let me just pretend to accomplish something by putting it on the screen. That's the failure of the left, apart from cancel culture and woke bullshit. The failure of the right is a conflation of capitalism with conservative culture, and their inability to deal with the social issues that are attendant on capitalism in the first place. So Jordan Peterson, for example, it's the social safety nets that these people don't like very much, right? Because they think it makes people weak, which is true to an extent, but you could critique that too. But you could actually be stronger if you're taken care of, in a way. But because you have time to develop yourself. But their failure is, I'm not gonna deal with these social issues because it's communism if I do, that's leftism if I do. And then I'm just gonna complain about why people are becoming more left-wing. That's the failure of the right, is that their inability to compromise. Well, that's the failure of the left too, but that's also the failure of the right. They cannot compromise with each other anymore, and so those two sides are sort of being pulled apart, and that's not going to be good for society, because society is based on compromise. It's a very mediocre thing, and both sides are pretending that they can have something special, even though being special, being unique, and that's the whole. That's completely contrary to society's interests. So they're not willing to compromise at all. And that's going to cause the downfall of society, if there's to be a downfall. So, or like, how the left is the victims. They're playing victims, but Jordan Peterson built most of his career on whining about being cancelled. And he doesn't like identity politics, but most of his philosophy is based on Christian identity. He doesn't like one-sided, doesn't like how the universities are controlled by liberals and leftists, which I don't know what to extent that's true. I suspect to a degree it's true, because liberals and leftists are just more intelligent, partly, and partly because of the woke bullshit. But he doesn't like safe spaces, yes, but the guy apparently built a online university where obviously all the teachers are right-wing or right-wing adjacent, you know. And then of course he would say, well, the liberal teachers don't want to teach. Of course you can, maybe, then you maybe should make a university better, more attractive to them, you know. But then the liberals could just make the same argument, like, yeah, the right-wingers just don't want to talk to us. They just don't want to come to our universities and talk to us, you know. And then maybe there's probably some element of truth in that too. But there's just a lot of hypocrisy there. And I think he was also whining about COVID lockdowns. But, you know, the idea of an online university just reproduces the same problem, right? It's not being there physically. You know, an online university, I think, is a sorry replacement for a physical place. So I just thought it was kind of funny how, you know, he was whining about how alienation from lockdowns, but then he reproduces the problem with this online university crap. And, you know, it also reeks of just being a grifter, you know, make money on miserable people, miserable, young, confused people, right? Because you could only be confused if you think it's worth listening to Jordan Peterson as your guide and mentor, who's a charlatan and an idiot. He's like supposed to be that. You know, the sophistry he does with like climate change. Well, we don't even know what climate is. You know, why don't you just say you're a climate denier? Why lie? Just stop lying. And again, I said before, there's problems with the climate thing, but with the solutions to it, the so-called solutions to it, sure. But the guy is just a climate denier, clearly. And he pretends not to be. You know, he's just such a coward. So those are some problems with the right wing today, and there's a lot of hypocrisy and bullshit, and the lack of compromise, and the lack of dealing with the problems that are attendant on their own ideology. They don't want to fix. And the left wing is just woke, and they also don't want to compromise, and, you know, it's just everybody's going too far, I think, these days. They don't understand that society is based on compromise. They don't want to do that anymore. And that's going to cause the boat to tilt and eventually, you know, list and then eventually capsize. That's what we're seeing now, basically. Okay, this video was already pretty long, and I'm sorry I rambled too much. I was unclear, but you have to understand this is a kind of ongoing project where I try to elucidate my thoughts. It's not final. It's not perfect. Do your own thinking. Do your own research. Thanks. Bye.